Okay, so David Foster Wallace is a pretty brilliant guy. He has a huge vocabulary, as you will discover, and he likes long, winding sentences, like filled with detail. He likes just an insane amount of detail. He loves listing things, and he'll put thousands of things in a list. He loves words, and he just enjoys the sound of them, and so he loves listing stuff. Um, Now, David Foster Wallace was a pretty big genius. There's actually a great movie about his life that's free on Netflix, and it's something you could watch. It's pretty enjoyable. It's pretty short. It's about 100 minutes long. It stars Jesse Eisenberg and Jason. I forget his name, um, but he's in the Muppet movie. I don't know that guy. Um, uh, David Foster Wallace. It's basically a story about a magazine journalist for Rolling Stone who wants to interview David Foster Wallace, and so he travels around with David Foster Wallace for a while and hangs out with him and learns about him. Um, and it's about the kind of troubled relationship between these two guys. And it's a pretty good movie. It's called The End of the Tour. And if I had been with you in the real world, I might have shown you this movie. But instead, I'm just going to recommend this movie, The End of the Tour. Um, okay. Um, David Foster Wallace also he struggled with mental illness quite a bit in his life with severe depression. Um, he was a brilliant guy, but he was very troubled. He had a very troubling relationship with a girlfriend who he treated very poorly. I mean, when I say very poorly, I mean like pushed her out of a moving car and kind of stalked her. He seemed like he had a lot of problems. And then in 2008, I think it was 2008, he committed suicide. He completed suicide. David Foster Wallace killed himself. You can kind of he was struggling with this idea that American culture basically is like, oh, are you unhappy? Let's give you more pleasure. Let's give you more fun. Here's the most delicious food. Here's the most fun movie. And David Foster Wallace was worried, like Socrates, that all of these things that were just fun, 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 might be bad for you. We don't like. It's a very unpleasant thought to have. That's what his book is about. That's what Infinite Jest is about. That pleasure might actually be bad for you. It's a very unpleasant thought. We don't want to. It's. I don't like thinking about it. Like I enjoy movies. I don't want the movies to be they're bad for you. Maybe to just live your life for pleasure and fun. Um, but like Socrates, thinking about that bad horse, he's very suspicious of pleasure because it's offered in American culture as um, like the way to fix anything. You just need to have more fun. Just do something fun for yourself. And David Foster Wallace was like he just felt like that was something troubling. That it's just fun, fun, fun. Don't think about it. Have fun. Don't think. Just have fun. And so he really struggled with that for a lot of his life, and it's a scary thing to think about. It's an unpleasant thing to think about. Um, the way in which fun and pleasure might be dangerous or bad for you in some way. For most people, they just feel like the whole point of life is just having as much fun as possible before you die. And David Foster Wallace wasn't sure. Most people are like, yeah, I'm going to do that. David Foster Wallace, he wasn't sure he was worried about it. He was worried that American culture was just keeping people happy all the time with stupid shit like binge watching television shows. And it is enjoyable to get a great TV show and just watch 100 episodes. But David Foster Wallace, he saw that and he thought there was something dangerous about it. He thought that maybe binge watching TV shows or watching 22 Marvel movies was a little bit like being addicted to heroin, and that there's something bad for you if you're constantly going back to this sort of empty, useless thing. It brings you pleasure, but it also pulls you away from the world and from things you should be thinking about. Very Socrates, right? It's that bad horse. Um, okay, so That's David Foster Wallace, and that's basically who he is. And I think it's worth knowing that he's an interesting guy. I can put up a link to some videos and stuff that he's done. He was brilliant, very shy, and he liked to kind of live. He kind of lived in the middle of nowhere, and um, he seemed like he was a sort of brilliant guy who just wanted to be like normal, and just wanted people. He was a famous. He just wanted everybody to kind of leave him alone. Um, okay, so that's that. Let's take a look at the David Foster Wallace piece. It's got some vocabulary things. You're going to need to look up some words. I will try to define something for you, but there's limits to what I can do on an iPhone video. So I don't know where else to go with this except to kind of get started on it. So let's get started. Okay, David Foster Wallace, considered a lobster. The enormous pungent, strong smelling. The enormous, pungent, and extremely well-marketed Maine Lobster Festival is held every late July in the state's mid-coast region, meaning the western side of Penobscot Bay, the nerve stem of Maine's lobster industry. So Maine is a state to the northeast, and they like lobster. And they have a festival where they cook lobster. It's a big, and David Foster Wallace was sent by a magazine. They said, go to this lobster festival in Maine where they just, it's a big celebration of eating lobster. You can go to similar things in New York. There's a pork festival, and you can just eat all different kinds of roast pork and, barbecue pork and bacon and sausage and all kinds of stuff. And so David Foster Wallace was sent by a magazine to go to this event and then write about it. And this is what he wrote. From my introduction, I imagine you will be getting the sense that David Foster Wallace is going to have some problems with this. It's going to be troubling. This is troubling. This is something that is not pleasant to think about. I think, again, going back to that idea about it's supposed to have fun and pleasure all the time. Like, David Foster Wallace, like, going to the dentist isn't fun. It's never fun to go to the dentist, but it's good for you to go to the dentist. And David Foster Wallace was like that. He kind of thought a lot about, like, Infinite Jest. It's a fascinating book. It's not really enjoyable to read, though. If you think about it, of course it's not enjoyable to read. The whole point, like, because people are like, God, why is it 1,500 pages? Why does it have footnotes? And why do the footnotes have footnotes? But of course, the whole point of the book is that pleasure might be bad for you. So the book shouldn't be pleasant to read. That would go against the entire point of the book, which is about pleasure maybe being dangerous or bad for you. And so he wrote this book that's like not the most fun thing in the world to read. It's pretty unpleasant. This piece that he writes here brings up some very troubling issues. So we're gonna go through it. All right, let's take a look at the Lobster Festival. Okay. Tourism and lobster are the mid-coast regions mid-coast Maine. Tourism and lobster are the mid-coast region's two main industries, and they're both warm weather enterprises. And the Maine Lobster Festival represents an intersection of industries than a deliberate collision, joyful and lucrative and loud. Lucrative means makes a lot of money. The assigned subject of this gourmet article, that's the magazine he's writing for, is the 65th annual MLF, 30th of July to the 3rd of August 2003, whose official theme this year was lighthouses, laughter, and lobster. Total attendance was over 100,000, due partially to a national CNN spot in June, during which a senior editor of Food and Wine magazine hailed the MLF as one of the best food-themed galas in the world. 2003 festival highlights: concert by Leanne Womack in Orleans, annual Maine Sea Goddess Beauty Pageant, Saturday's Big Parade, Sunday's William D. Atwood Memorial Crate Race, annual Amateur Cook Competition, carnival rides and midway attractions and food booths in the MLF's eating tent, where something over 25,000 pounds of fresh-caught Maine lobster is consumed after preparation in the world's largest lobster cooker near the ground's north entrance. Also available are lobster rolls, lobster turnovers, lobster sauté, down east lobster salad, lobster bisque, lobster ravioli, deep fried lobster dumplings. Lobster thermidor is obtainable at a deep fried lobster dumplings. Lobster thermidor is available at a sit-down restaurant called the Black Pearl on Harbor Park's Northwest Wharf. A large all-pine booth sponsored by the Maine Lobster Promotion Council has free pamphlets with recipes, eating tips, lobster fun facts. The winner of Friday's amateur cooking competition prepares saffron lobster ramekins, the recipe for which is available for public downloading at www.mainelobsterfestival.com. There were lobster t-shirts and lobster bobblehead dolls and inflatable lobster pool toys and clamp-on lobster hats with big scarlet claws that wobble on springs. Your assigned correspondent saw it all, accompanied by one girlfriend and both his own parents, one of which parents was actually born and raised in Maine, albeit in the extreme northern inland part, which is potato country and a world away from the touristic mid-coast. Touristic meaning for tourists. You can see a lot of David Foster Wallace's style right there. He loves listing things. He loves detail. He thinks it's very fun. I think it's fun too, by the way. But he thinks it's very fun to just sort of list off all of these details. He likes to list off the name of organizations, and he's going to list off all kinds of different things you can make with lobster. By the way, it's not super important that you understand what all those lobster dishes are, although you're welcome to, put some of those into Google and see what pictures come up for lobster turnovers, lobster rolls, lobster sauté. Lobster roll is basically like a hot dog, but they put lobster in it instead of hot dogs. By the way, I know this is stupid and I shouldn't say this, but if you don't know what a lobster is, not everybody does, look it up. But it's essentially a little, I don't know how to describe it, but look it up on the internet. It's a lobster. It's a creature. It's a sea creature that people eat, and it's considered delicacy. It's like fancy food, and it's quite expensive. Okay, next video.